Welcome to the video demo series for Configure.IT. Unleash the hassle-free way to build bug-free mobile apps in the quickest possible turnaround time. So in this video, we want to go ahead and discuss how to sync a MySQL database to the SQLite database. So how to take data from the remote database and write it to the local app database. And the way we're going to get started doing that is we're going to go to the Backend. So we'll click on Go to Backend. And then we're going to take a look at the table that we're going to be using. So we'll click on Configure. And we're going to go down to Mod Country and View Data. Because this is the table that we're going to pull the data from to write to the SQLite database. So all it is basically a list of countries. And we'll come down, View All. And you can see that there's approximately 239 different countries. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and write a MySQL API to pull the country list. So if we'll come down and we'll click on MySQL API, and we'll go ahead and open that up in a new tab. And we'll click Add New. This API, we'll go ahead and name it Get Countries. And the API category will just be miscellaneous. No input parameters because we just want to go ahead and get the entire list. Now we want to go ahead and add a query block. And the main table, again, it's going to be mod countries. And we'll go ahead and return all the records. And we'll click Next. And we're going to return the country ID, the country, and the country code. One thing to look at on the country ID, if we return the country ID to the SQLite database, it will actually take the value from the MySQL database and write it into the SQLite database. Now, if we were to omit the country ID, since it's the primary key, the SQLite database will actually do an auto increment and assign its own country ID. We can click Save because that's all we want. We just want to go ahead and return them all. And we'll click a Finish. Then for the message, we'll type Success. So now that we have that API written, then we can come up here and let's just do a refresh just to make sure that it is returning all the values. And we'll click on Debug. Okay, so there you go. So we're getting the country ID, the country, and the country code. So that's working beautifully. So now, next thing we need to do is go into the SQLite database and go ahead and create our new table. So we'll do that now. So now we just need to do Add New. And the table name, we'll just call it country, and 5 fields is fine. We'll click Add. So the first field, we're going to do the country name. The second field, we'll do the country ID. And that's going to be an integer. And the last one would be the country code. And that'll be a bar chart as well. And we can just remove the empty ones and save and close. Now the next thing we need to do is go ahead and write the SQLite API. And we're going to do that by coming over to SQLite API. And we'll open that up in a new tab. Click Add New. And we're going to name this one Get Remote Countries. And no input parameters. We'll click Next. Now we want to add the remote API call. And we're going to select the API that we want to add from the MySQL API. And we're going to, it's going to be Get Countries. We'll click Save. Now we want to add an additional query so that it can insert the values from the remote API call into the SQLite database. And the way we do that is add another query block, and we're going to name this one insert countries. The query type will be an insert. The main table we're going to name country, insert ID, and we're going to do a batch insert, and the looping key will be the remote API call. We'll click next, and now we'll select the value. So the country ID will be MC country ID, the country name will be MC country, and the country code will be MC country code. This V country ID is actually just a duplicate, so we don't actually need that one, and we'll click save. Now we can add a finish block, and we can just add success. So now what we need to do is go ahead and sync this API to the MySQL API. So we'll go over here and click on Sync API. Click OK. Now we need to do the same thing for the MySQL database. So we'll click Sync SQLite Database. Now that everything's synced, we can go ahead and test out the SQLite API. So we'll click on the API, we'll refresh it, and hit debug. So as you can see, we have insert ID of 238, so that means that 238 values were inserted, and we can verify that by coming over here to the SQLite database, and we'll click on View Data. And there they are. There's all 238 countries in the SQLite database that we synced from the MySQL database. Now, the question you might have is, well, what if I don't want everything? What if I only want stuff that, has been updated after a certain time, or I only want certain values or something like that? Well, we can do that too. So I'll show you how to do that. But first, let's go ahead and delete all the values that we have in the SQLite database. So we'll go ahead and select everything and click on delete, and we'll delete everything out. Okay, so we've deleted everything out of the SQLite database. Now we just need to go ahead and edit the APIs. So let's go ahead and edit the MySQL API. So we'll come down here to the Get Countries API, and now we need to add an input parameter. So in this case, we're just going to do the input parameter of the country ID. Now, this could be if you wanted, say, for example, everything updated or added since a date, then that would be the modified date or the date added. But in this case, it's just going to be the country ID. So the input parameter will be country ID. We'll click Update Next. And now we'll go and edit the query, and everything's going to stay pretty much the same, except for we'll return the same table fields, but this is where things will change right here. We want to return the country ID where, let's say, it is greater than our input parameter. So we'll assign the country ID. So basically now what we're saying is we're going to put in a country ID, and we want the API to give us everything that has a country ID greater than our input parameter. So we'll click Save and Save Settings. So now we need to go over to our SQLite API and edit that one. So now we need to add the input parameter to this API. So we'll come over here to API Detail, and the input parameter will be country ID. Update Next. Now for the remote API call, you can see that we have a new input parameter, country ID, and we need to tell it which variable to use. So we're going to come down to Input Parameters, Country ID, and we're going to click Save. Save Settings. And we're going to sync this API. So every time you change a setting, you want to go ahead and sync this API. Now, we can just refresh the screen. And we'll do, for the country ID, we'll do 200. So basically what this is going to do is this going to return all country IDs that have a value greater than 200. So we'll click on debug. And you can see now that it's actually returned 39 records. So we can take a look at that if we come over to the SQLite database and we'll click refresh. And there you go, starting at 201, and you can see there's 39 records. Now, what would have happened if we were to run this API again without deleting any of the data that was in our SQLite database? Well, let's take a look. So if we were to run it again, we're going to get an error because it's trying to insert that data where there's already data. So if you get this type of error, then that basically means that you already have data in there. So you'd have to go back and take a look at that and delete that data. And that's how you get information from the MySQL database into the SQLite database. Want to learn more? Visit our Help Center for additional tutorials, our Support Center, and our online community, where our support team will assist you. Keep configuring.